Logarithmic properties to expand or condense the following expression. Right, so the first expression for part A, we only have one log. So for this part, we have to expand the log expression, right? So let's get to that first. For part A, what we're going to do in here is that the most important thing for this type problem is to identify the terms of its own, right? So for the inside logs in here, you have to circle different terms. You have to break it down to different terms, okay? So I'm seeing x to the negative 3 as one group, right? And the next group in here, I'm seeing the top one, the x and the minus 1, they are together because they have the same, you know, they're in the same parentheses and they have the same, like, effect on 2 and the root 5, right? And on the bottom, we can break it down into two separate things, right? I'm seeing square root of x as one group of its own. And I'm seeing 3x minus 2 all to the power of negative 4 is a group of its own, right? Because the 3x and the negative 2, they together in the parentheses. So they're together, right? They are a group. So now that you identify, like, you break it into their own groups, the second thing that you have to do in here is to decide which one would be a positive value and which one would be a negative value. So the thumb of rules in here is that whichever one on top will take a positive value and whichever one on the bottom of the fraction will take the negative value, right? So the blue one in here is easy. This for sure is going to be a plus, right? Positive because it's on top. Green one is easy, it's bottom, so it's negative. Purple, also bottom, so it's negative. The red one, though, how do you know whether it's positive or negative, right? You have to make a fraction out of it. And we can make a fraction out of anything, out of everything, if we put it over 1. So just imagine if we put it over 1 like this, right? Then we would have x to the negative 3 on top, right? And because it's on top, it would have a positive sign. Let's put a plus in here. I'll tell you why it matters in a second. So we know that for part A, we're going to have 4 different logs, right? So let's break it down to 4 different logs. So I'm having one log in here. And then let's make some space for this. One log in here. One log in here. And one log in here. Okay. So the red one is positive, so I'm going to have a positive in here and an x to the negative 3 in here. Matter of fact in here, because you don't have to connect the red one with anything like previously, so you can drop this plus, right? Because, like, just imagine if you have like a positive 1, then you just write 1. You don't put the plus in front of a positive 1. If it's like if it's the first thing you write, right? And then for the next one in blue, we're going to have a positive log in here because it's on the top, right? And then you're just going to drop, you're going to carry whatever you have for like the inside. You're going to copy it down here. Okay? And for the green one, it's going to be negative because it's on the bottom. So we're going to put a negative in front. And then for the inside, we copy the same thing. Okay? The purple is also negative because it's on the bottom. And then the belonging of it, it would be 3x minus 2 to the negative 4. The final touch on this one is that we're going to bring all the exponent, we're going to bring all the powers to the front of log. Okay? So then what we're going to do in here is that for the first one, we're going to do negative 3 and then log and an x. Right? Just bring the power to the front, period. For the second one, it's harder a little bit. Just a tiny little bit. And the reason why in here is that you have to keep in mind about the inside out law or the rule, okay? So how do we handle the roots? We're going to take the power on the inside of the roots divided by the power of the root on the outside. So inside I'm seeing a 2, and on the outside of the root I'm seeing a 5. So inside out, I'm going to do 2 over 5 for the root. And now that I'm done with the root, right, like I handled the root by putting the 2 over 5 on the front, I'm just going to have log. And then the group I'm having on the following in here, it would be x minus 1, right? And I'm going to put parentheses over them because x and minus 1, they are together. So we have to group them together. Okay. So next one, we also have a root. right? So for the negative log of square root of x, we also have to think about the inside out things, right? So one way to think about it in here is that square root, it means the square root is 2, right? Square is 2. So there would be an invisible 2 on the outside. And then on the inside, if you don't see any number for the power, you can assume that it's a 1, right? Always. If you don't see a number for the power, you can assume that it's a 1. And then if you apply the inside out rule, then first thing first, let's copy down the negative, and then inside out, you're going to get 1 over 2. And then after that, you're going to do log. And then since we get rid of the root already, we're just going to have x left over. And the last thing we're going to have in here is minus, copy it down. And then I'm going to also bring out the power to the front. And then I'm going to have log of the same group, copy down, right? So 3x minus 2. The final touch in here is that if I see 2 negatives here, I'm going to make it a positive, right? Because negative times negative, I'm going to have a positive number, right? So for the sake of time, let me just go ahead and copy all the thing that we have from the previous line down. And I'm just going to replace 2 negatives by a positive. And that would be it. Right? So the twist in here, I'm going to put it in yellow. 2 negatives in here is going to make a positive 4. Right? And I'm just going to copy down whatever I have from the previous line, which is log. And then in purple, I have the group of 3x minus 2. And this is it for part A. Okay? So let me just like box it for part A. For part B though, what we're going to do for part B is that, well, we're going to have to do the inverse of it. We're going to have to do the backward of what we just did, right? So we have 4 groups in here. This one is positive. Well, let me first of all circle them. This one is positive because, well, if you see a 2, then it's got to be a positive 2, right? And the second one is a negative because there's a visual negative in front of 3 over 2. The next one is a positive number also because there's a positive in front of the 5. And the last one is a negative, right? Because we have a negative in front of the 3. So now that we identify which one is positive and which one is negative, right? We will decide the location of it on the fraction on the inside log. Or in this case, we have an ln, right? So for part B, we're going to condense it, right? We have 4 logs from the beginning of time. And then now we're going to condense it. We're going to condense all 4 of it to just 1 log expression. So we will do 1 log expression like this, right? And then give me 1 second. Let me just copy it down, make some space for it. And then in here, I'm going to put parentheses because I know I'm going to have a big fraction, right? Okay, let's talk about which one is on top and which one is on the bottom. Positive, we're going to have the red one and the green one on top, right? So first thing first, because it's on top, right, let's bring back the power to the back of the group. So for the red one, I'm going to get x plus 1 square, right? Because I have a 2 in front, so I'm going to bring it back. So it's going to be x plus 1 square for the red one. And I'm done with it. For the green one, if I bring it back, also, I'm going to get x minus 1 to the 5th power. So I'm done with 2 of them. Now I'm going to handle the minus 1, right? So because I already took care of the negative, if you want to, you can just, mark it out. So just slash out the negatives in here so that you don't have to worry about it anymore, right? So then for the blue one, if you bring back the power, right, it's going to be x to the 3 over 2. And it's negative, so it's going to stay on the bottom. So we're going to get x to the 3 over 2. For the purple one, we're going to have the same game. So it's going to be 2x squared minus 1 to the power of 3. And keep in mind that because I slash out the negatives in here, right, because we know that the negative, it means we're going to have things in the bottom. So we don't have to worry about the negatives anymore. Okay. The final touch on this one is that we really hate to have a fractional exponent, right? So this guy in here, let me circle it in yellow. This one is a bad like things we have in math. So based on the inside out rule that we just learned in here, top over bottom. So the 3, it would be on the inside of the root, and the square, it would be on the outside of the root. Okay. So let me just copy down everything, and I'll show you how to work it out. Okay. So after this, instead of having 3 over 2 like that, we will have a 2 on the inside. I mean, have a 3 on the inside because it goes inside out. So the 3, it would go on the inside. Let me do it in this. So we would have a root. The 3 would go on the inside, and then the 2, it would go on the outside. Okay? And normally, if you think about it, people call it square root, but there would be no square in front, right? The square root with the invisible 2. So you can just choose to leave the 2 there, or you can just, you know, drop the 2, and then people will still understand that, well, there's an invisible 2 there because we talk about square root. Okay? And this is it. This is the final answer for part B.